Welcome to Ideagen TV, presented globally by Microsoft. Back for part two of an incredible conversation with Sharan Hildebrand from Hitachi Solutions. Welcome.
Hello again.
Welcome back, Jim MacLennan, Hitachi Solutions. We're back for more, ladies and gentlemen. We are back for more, and I'd like to go right into the questions. Sharan, what is the gold standard of building a diverse, sustainable leadership team? And how do you begin to manage, measure to achieve this?
I love this question, and it's kind of a trick answer because there's no gold standard. And if there's anything, in my opinion, in my experience so far, and I think the other conversations that we've heard and have been privileged to listen to today confirm that and reinforce it. Everyone is still trying to figure out what good looks like. And I was reminded in preparation for this of a conversation I had recently with a woman by the name of Alicia Edmonds. She is a business development and thought leader. She's a huge advocate for women in leadership. We were talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. She's trying to develop one within her own company right now. And she said, Sharon, everyone talks about creating awareness and making people aware, but people don't talk enough about what to do about it. And I think what Ideagen's doing, what the UN goals are focused on, it's amazing. And the awareness, the groundswell is there. When we think about leadership, I've seen and I feel very passionately that we should be prioritizing capturing these great stories, capturing the stories of what's happening in the rainforest. We just heard a couple of those, capturing the stories of what our legislators are dealing with and talking to their constituents with, creating a black belt, of some type of standard. So when it comes to leadership and the SDGs, it extends beyond just awareness. We have to start there, but what I'd like to see is triple down on creating that next step, that documentation, that how-to playbook. And I don't profess to be an expert on all of this, but there was another great opportunity I had. I saw a podcast from Jean-Philippe Couture from Microsoft, one of the EVPs. He's got an amazing podcast. And I understand that you're familiar with one of the folks that I was very inspired by, Akhtar. And he wrote a book called Purpose Mindset. And it's pre-released now. However, it's focused on how Microsoft is inspiring their employees to, and it says on the cover, change the world. And I think it's a great example of how an organization, how a company, the private sector can actually invest in creating that blueprint and demonstrating leadership that way. One of the things that he talked about in his podcast was companies need to focus on creating movements in lieu of organizations, subcommittees, things in pods of people I'm paraphrasing right now.
Right.
And that word movement just landed so well with me because, motion breeds motion. And it's when people feel compelled and pulled and connected to something, that's when they're actually going to act. So small plug for his book. Can't wait to read it. I bought my pre-release, but I think
it's a great read. I have a copy.
And I think focusing on the concept of creating movements and over structure first is very important when it comes to what the gold standard could be, what we aspire to make it for SDGs.
And it's incredible to hear you say there is no gold standard at the moment. I mean, there really isn't. So that was a real trick question. What really was, and you got me there. But I'm just blown away by the insights that you provided here. In thinking of where you sit at Hitachi, in working with partners like Microsoft, of course, and the work that you're doing, and yet at the same time trying to create a movement. Mm-hmm. You're leading that way, Sharon, in helping to create that movement. And you've done so for many years, and with Jim's support and his leadership as well, and your CEO, Tom, I know that it's company-wide. It's not living in a little vacuum.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful thing. Jim, we talked a little about in part one of our interview today about sustainability, answering what is sustainability.
Sure.
We tried to define it. Let's go back to that for a second, because I know, it's a nebulous term, but what is sustainability again?
I think my favorite term that I've heard over the past day, it just super simplifies it, is how are you going to get to tomorrow? how are you going to get that organization to, a year from now, 5 years from now? Do you really intend to build a company that's just good for the next quarter? Or are you really trying to build something that's going to be part of the world for a long time, create value for a long time? I believe in my product. I believe in my service. Don't you want it to last forever type thing?
Right.
All sorts of math ideas about, nothing lasts forever and stuff. So I won't go there. But I think when you translate the idea, my old school ideas around a sustainable process or a sustainable system and go outside and understand, well, that system has to live not just within the four walls, but also in an environment. And it has to have people that can actually run and use and consume and tune and improve and deliver. So that's where you get into the impact on the environment, the consumption of resources in the environment, and how people are treated. So this company can sustain over time. To me, that's a unifying sort of thread that I can pull. Now I can just march through the SDGs and say, well, this is how that applies. This is how that applies. Some of those specific sustainability goals won't matter to your company. That's fine. These others will. It's always a case-by-case basis on what really counts. And I don't think anybody's ever going to want to hit all 17, but a lot of them will apply. But they'll apply differently, and that's where the art comes in.
Well, and that's where the sustainability in quotes comes in.
Mm-hmm.
How is your company going to make it to tomorrow?
Yeah.
What if you focus on the wrong goals and you don't make it to tomorrow? That wasn't so sustainable.
True, but that gets into, even before sustainability, how are you running your company?
Right.
Do you have a clear definition of to me, strategy is easy. Corporate strategy is easy. It's what you do, where you play, and how you win. And if you can't tell your strategy in 35 words, you are over complicating it. What you do is product and service. Where you play is you understand your market and you understand your customers, and how you win is how do you differentiate? That's the definition of strategy right there. On top of that, now, how can I use the sustainability goals to either be driven by those or to drive those? And now it's like print money time.
This might become the most popular viewed Ideagen TV segment in the history of time. Right? So, Jim.
That's all HBR stuff. I'm
HBR.
an MBA. Wow.
Well, you'll be an HBR thanks to that. What was the most surprising story to date relating to companies that you're dealing with? You deal with a lot of companies, you're doing a lot of advisory work. What has been the most, I'll start with Jim, but I'd love to hear from you as well, Sharon, on this.
It was surprising. It was along the same lines as you start off. And a lot of people today are asking the same basic question. What exactly is sustainability? What does it mean to you? And so I was having a conversation with a CEO of an industrial machinery components manufacturer. So a lot of little things goes inside bigger machines that you'd probably recognize, all the stuff that you don't see. And I said, well, what does sustainability mean to you? And he kind of blew it off, and he was talking about architecture, and it's not really important to our company. It's not. And I said, really? You don't care about the environment? He says, oh, no. When we put in capital equipment, every single time, we make sure that it's energy efficient. We actually chase after those things. We prioritize those projects. You love sustainability. No. That's just how we think. That's just the way we are. We're not. So I'm not understanding how he's not putting the two together. And then later on in the conversation, he is. So I consider this to be a very sustainability focused company. That's great. And it's part of their culture. It's part of how the leaders think. They think that's the right thing to do by definition. Then later on in the conversation, he was talking about an expansion they're doing into a new geographical area with some manufacturing and some distribution. And he was lamenting the fact that it was very hard to get full-time workers. And it was hard to get people to stay. And what he was pointing out is his competition in the area. He's new to the area. His competition was more established companies that have legacy and loyalty. That was his word, loyalty. And I said, well, the way to jumpstart that, you have to develop a really strong culture. And if you have a really strong culture, especially one that appeals to your target workers, the younger generations, you would solve that hiring problem. And by the way, that culture that they really want is sustainability. he's like, I don't understand what you're saying. I'm like, oh my God, you just told me you're the most sustainable company in the world. It's part of your culture, and you could solve this problem. But okay, I didn't quite do it that way. I didn't do the dolphin voice, but getting folks to understand there are elements in how you think and how you do what you do and how you get better at it every single day that you can absolutely apply to this idea. And it's just to think of yourself a little bit differently, to sort of see the world from a different lens. I think that's a big part of this sustainability conversation.
It really is, and it's startling. Sharon, what's your take?
So I have a story, but actually I've got two stories, and one of my stories is one of Jim's. So I actually,
My invoice is in the mail.
and yeah, I need to hand the mic back over to him because when this conversation took place, we talked like the next few days following. We happened to be in the office, and he told me about this conversation, and I went, "What?" And it was a head scratcher because we've talked at length about different viewpoints depending on which generation you're from. And I personally know this individual he had the conversation with, and I was really surprised. So I'm going to hand the mic back to him and then take it back to him.
So we were having a couple beers, and it was a great time.
Him and this individual.
Yeah. Not at work. It was after work, and I was having a conversation. I asked him about sustainability, and he almost sort of said, "I'm kind of in a point of despair. I think it's too late." And he was talking about what he was thinking about. Cut you off in the beers, but he was talking about what he was thinking about was it's like the world is already full. There's too many people and not enough resources to cover them. And I said, that's really interesting because just today, a couple weeks ago, I read a story about how in the UK they have come up with basically they've proven it's possible in nuclear fusion to have cheap, abundant energy. Very cheap, totally abundant. They had a proof of concept experiment that worked. I said, we just haven't innovated enough to solve it. We could probably have 10 times as many people on this planet as we do now, but we have to think differently. We have to do different things. It's like, you're too young to despair. No way. This innovation is really going to help us do it. And so innovation in the area of sustainability is just a really great target.
This young man's 24. That's where to hear like a 24-year-old talk about despair, I went, just kind of.
Well, maybe despair was a strong word, but
So from my own point of view, I'm going back to Microsoft. It's one of the latest experiences that I had. The team that I lead, my team of Alliance Sales Associates, they go and they target and they market to Microsoft because we develop and deepen those relationships to strengthen our channel. And I received an email from someone, one of the leaders of a team of field folks from Microsoft, wanting to and acknowledging that it's not part, which you want to talk to me about, was not part of a formal Microsoft program, but they wanted to start doing some experimenting with teeing up sustainability to manufacturers to drive change, and I'm paraphrasing, the technology will just follow. And I loved it, and it gave me hope. And I thought, oh, big ass company like Microsoft, we have someone in there, someone in a position of influence. She manages a team of 10 or 12, saying let's play around with this. And we had a couple calls. Actually, I pulled Jim in, and we have some great motions now with this team. Coming up with some very specific programming, and they've identified a target list of manufacturing accounts. And at the end of the day, we've all been talking, since this morning about we need to be profitable and make money in order to make change. And so it's perfectly fine to do good while doing well. But I just was very pleasantly surprised and hopeful from a sales standpoint. Carrying a bag for 35 years, you always think that salespeople are selfish and self-serving, but wanting to lead with an agenda that actually lines up with one or more of the SDGs, I thought was really cool.
You were pleasantly surprised. It's incredible. And that's the innovation, right?
Yeah.
That comes out of these relationships. And so to close, I think this is a very important question. What are each of you doing to accelerate and or advance the impact of sustainability at Hitachi? Jim?
So in my role, I do digital advisory. So I'm helping our customers understand how to do a digital transformation, fully buzzword compliant there, but really how to make it real, right? And it's all about value creation and understanding, as Sharon said, what does good look like and how to get better with a maturity model, and And sustainability has become part of both of those conversations. When we talk about value creation with a company, do you understand your stakeholders, your owners, your employees, your partners, customers and vendors, and your community? And that's a valid piece of the value statement. Some companies will say, it doesn't matter to us. Other companies will say, yeah, and they'll get into it. But it's custom. And the second thing too, in that maturity model, we lay out some high level statements about what does it mean to have maturity in your approach, sustainability approaches to your operations, your customers, your products, and your team, and your data. But that's really techy. And so we work the concepts of sustainability into those conversations to get them front and center, and hopefully eventually to either accelerate their transformations and or create value.
Incredible. Sharon.
I'm fortunate enough to be the executive sponsor of one of our ERGs called Kansai Women. And we recently launched our second ERG, Kansai Pride. And being involved at the level that I am with these organizations, it's great to mentor and influence and have events and meetings. But to be honest, I'm very inspired listening to everyone today. And I have a note to talk to you offline about what we can do. What else can I do being in this position at Hitachi, having great teams of people to line up with the SDGs that make sense, that are more applicable. I mean, I see that myself being in a position to invoke that change and sprinkle some fresh thinking in Hitachi. We've got about 100 members in Kansai Women, and I think Pride is about 50 right now. So there's that concept, and with the partnerships that I also manage. Microsoft's the largest partnership that I manage, that alliance, but there is a sea of about 50 or so ISV separate vendors. And I think that corporate social responsibility can be leveraged to make a connection and deepen that connection, with them as well.
Incredible. So I want to just end on a really sort of ad lib note. So how do you see the future, i.e., going back to the definition of sustainability?
Mm-hmm.
There's ESG, there's sustainability, there's all these definitions. How are you all individually and collectively as part of Hitachi going to lead that way into the future, to define it, to leave that stake in the ground? Jim?
That's an interesting question. I like it when I get a kick out of helping people see things differently. And, I see the future as, I did it a couple of years ago with digital transformation. Now that's become, my full-time job, and now my part-time job and full-time job is becoming the same thing with sustainability. I think in the next 5 years, people will get it. I'll pick the next one. I really get a kick out of helping people understand, here's complexity. What's that one thread that you can pull to sort of make sense and make good stuff happen? That's what I like.
Sharon, you have the last word here.
Wow. All right. So two things. First is to continue down the path that I just mentioned, expanding the reach, casting a wider net, and inviting people in to help come up with this blueprint, that second half of what we need to do that I talked about. But I'm in a really fortunate, blessed position because of you and Ideagen being the chair of Chicago, and which I take very seriously and I'm very grateful for. And I've been talking to a number of people. You've already met Ferris, a few other people in the Chicagoland area, to position Hitachi and leverage the initiatives and the change that I'm looking to drive with the company, which, by the way, also lining up with our friends in Japan. We're headquartered at Tokyo-based Hitachi Ltd. Very corporate social responsibility minded, sure. And they have a number of great global programs in place. And I just found out a couple of these people actually live in Chicago that are tied to the program. So everything happens for a reason. But I would love to leverage my position, being the chair for Chicago, and create a community of like-minded people to join Hitachi, and awesome. As we remain committed to driving the goals forward. So you and I talked about the advisory board concept. I'm still dog with the bone on that, and I would say that's
wow. That's an incredible last word. Sharan Hildebrand, Hitachi Solutions. Jim MacLennan, Hitachi Solutions. Leading the way to change the world. Ideagen TV, presented globally by Microsoft.